Today we are examining an important claim circulating among Iraqi Dinar analysts concerning Iraq's 2027 federal budget, the timing of a potential exchange rate adjustment, and a proposed September window that some observers believe could become significant. The analysis comes from Newshound guru Ariel, who argues that the submission of the 2027 budget could create what he describes as a fiscal wall. According to this view, any major change in the value assigned to the Iraqi dinar would need to occur before the budget reaches parliament, because the budget has to reflect the currency value being used by the government. That is an interesting argument, but it is important to separate an analytical theory from an officially confirmed policy decision. At this point, the information provided does not establish that the Central Bank of Iraq has announced a specific exchange rate change for September, nor does it confirm that a revaluation will occur during the proposed window. Instead, the argument is based on the relationship between monetary policy, government budgeting, and the timing of fiscal planning. The central point of this analysis is the 2027 budget. Iraq's federal budget is not simply a document listing government spending. It is a major economic framework that incorporates government revenues, expenditures, oil assumptions, public sector obligations, investment programs, and various economic calculations. Because exchange rates can influence the dinar value of government revenues, imports, public spending, and other financial calculations, any major and officially implemented change in the exchange rate regime could have implications for budget preparation. This is where the fiscal wall theory comes into the discussion. The argument suggests that once the 2027 budget is prepared using a particular exchange rate assumption, changing that assumption afterward could become more complicated. If the government were preparing a budget based on one exchange rate and then the exchange rate changed substantially after the budget had already been submitted, policymakers might have to reassess portions of the budget and its underlying calculations. However, that does not automatically mean a currency adjustment must occur before the budget reaches parliament. Governments can revise budgets, modify assumptions, introduce amendments, or respond to economic developments during the legislative process. Therefore, the existence of a budget deadline should not be interpreted as proof that a rate change is mandatory before that deadline. The second part of Ariel's analysis focuses on September. The claim identifies the 1st of September as the earliest point at which what he calls the enforcement infrastructure would be in place. From there, the proposed operational corridor extends through approximately the 20th of September to the 25th of September. In this theory, that period becomes important because it would occur before the expected late September budget deadline. For Iraqi dinar followers, this timing is certainly worth watching, but it needs to be approached carefully. A calendar window is not the same thing as an official announcement. Unless the Central Bank of Iraq, the Iraqi government, or another authoritative institution confirms a new exchange rate policy, September dates should be considered an analytical scenario rather than a guaranteed event. The most important question is therefore not simply whether September is possible. The more important question is what evidence would demonstrate that Iraq is actually preparing for a meaningful change in the dinar's official value. Markets and currency systems generally respond to policy decisions through official channels. A genuine exchange rate adjustment would normally involve clear communication from relevant institutions, changes in official rates or monetary instructions, banking system implementation, and potentially corresponding changes in government financial calculations. These are the types of developments that would provide stronger evidence than speculation based solely on a date. For short-term observers of the Iraqi dinar, the next several weeks could therefore be important, primarily because of what policymakers communicate about monetary policy and the 2027 budget. Investors and currency holders should pay attention to official statements, budget developments, central bank announcements, banking reforms, inflation data, foreign exchange market conditions, and Iraq's broader fiscal position. Another important issue is that an exchange rate change is not necessarily the same thing as a dramatic revaluation. Currency policy can take many forms. Authorities could maintain the existing framework, adjust an official rate gradually, modify the mechanism used to determine the rate, or make broader changes to monetary policy. Each scenario would have different consequences. This distinction matters because online discussions about the Iraqi dinar sometimes treat every possible exchange rate adjustment as if it automatically means a dramatic increase in purchasing power. That is not how currency policy works. The economic impact depends on the size of the change, the mechanism used, inflation conditions, foreign exchange reserves, banking system stability, government finances, and the confidence of households and businesses. If Iraq were to make a meaningful change to its exchange rate policy, the short-term impact could be significant across the economy. Import prices could change. Businesses would have to adjust pricing and accounting systems. Government financial calculations could require revision, and banks would need to ensure that their systems were capable of processing the new rate. Consumers could also experience changes in the prices of imported goods, depending on how the adjustment was implemented. At the same time, the long-term implications would depend heavily on the broader economic reforms accompanying the currency policy. A stronger currency by itself does not solve structural economic problems. Iraq would still need sustainable government finances, a productive private sector, stronger banking institutions, improved payment systems, reduced dependence on cash, and continued efforts to diversify the economy beyond oil. This is especially important when considering the 2027 budget. A budget can provide a framework for government spending, but long-term currency stability depends on much more than the number written into a fiscal document. Monetary policy and fiscal policy have to work together. If government spending expands rapidly while economic productivity remains weak, pressure on the currency could continue regardless of a short-term exchange rate decision. For Iraqi Dinar followers, the practical takeaway is that the September timeline should be viewed as a period to monitor, rather than a deadline guaranteeing a currency event. If policymakers are preparing a substantial adjustment, evidence should begin appearing through official channels. Watch for central bank communications, government announcements, parliamentary budget discussions, banking instructions, and changes to the official exchange rate framework. There is also an important distinction between the budget submission date and the final approval of the budget. A budget can move through multiple stages before becoming final policy. Therefore, even if the budget is submitted in September, that does not necessarily mean every monetary policy decision must be completed beforehand. The strongest approach for anyone following the Iraqi dinar is to avoid making financial decisions based exclusively on projected dates or unofficial commentary. Currency markets are influenced by economic fundamentals and official policy decisions, and unexpected developments can change timelines quickly. A responsible analysis should therefore focus on what can be verified rather than what is merely anticipated. Looking ahead, the 2027 budget process could nevertheless become an important indicator of Iraq's economic direction. If the government introduces new fiscal assumptions, banking reforms continue, and monetary authorities make changes to the exchange rate framework, those developments could provide a clearer picture of Iraq's monetary strategy. Conversely, if the budget proceeds under the existing exchange rate structure, that would be evidence that the September revaluation scenario was not confirmed. The key message today is simple. The proposed 1st of September through the 2nd of September 0 to 25 window is an analytical theory connected to the timing of Iraq's 2027 budget process. It is not an official confirmation of a dinar revaluation or a guaranteed exchange rate change. The budget relationship is economically relevant, but the actual timing and nature of any currency policy decision ultimately depend on Iraqi authorities and the formal monetary and fiscal process. For dinar followers, the most valuable information will come from official announcements rather than predictions. September could bring important developments, but responsible analysis requires watching the evidence as it emerges. As we move closer to the 2027 budget cycle, we will continue monitoring the Iraqi dinar, central bank policy, government fiscal decisions, banking reforms, and other economic developments that could affect Iraq's currency and financial system. Make sure to subscribe to Iraqi Dinar News and like this video so you can stay informed with factual and responsible updates as new information becomes available. Thank you for watching. Remember, currency markets can change, and no specific exchange rate outcome or date is guaranteed. This content is provided for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice.